Sir, without any further ado, Secretary Ryan McCarthy.
Time. You see how much water they gave me? Good morning. I thought I'd go through the FY21 proposal, the philosophy that the Army leadership team has put together. But a couple of things, the two primary variables when you look at this equation is its current dynamics and a little bit of history. So 3 years ago, when we established our priorities, Secretary Esper, General Milley, General McConville, and I, and then Sergeant Major Army Dan Daly, was how do you maintain the current trajectory with demand we face worldwide, but also reignite our modernization efforts. So we're in year 3 of this journey. But if you look at the world, we have 191,000 people deployed. We are 60% of combatant commanders' requirements worldwide. And we got to modernize our weapon systems, the major weapon systems, which are on average about 40 to 45 years old. So those dynamics banging into each other every day makes it very hard for us. So we're trying to thread the needle right now. Back 3 years ago, when we made this decision, we had readiness, modernization, and reform as the 3 priorities of the Army, and they're going to stay that way for the foreseeable future. Because if you see 191,000 folks being deployed on that consistent basis, we've got to maintain a readiness posture that has to be heightened at all times. We had 2 brigade combat teams at the highest levels of readiness 3 years ago. Today, we're north of 25. And that's as much of the funding increase that we got in FY18 and 19 in this 20 to 21 deal as it is the fanatical focus of the leadership team. Mark Milley, Jim McConville, Abe Abrams, Mike Garrett, the training plans, and looking at all the wickets they got to go through to get a unit ready to deploy to combat. And if you were to go down to a battalion in the 82nd, they sound exactly like McConville. Everybody understands what they have to do, and there's a fanatical focus and emphasis on that. And nothing can prove it more than doing a cold start, no notice emergency deployment on New Year's Eve. 82nd Airborne Division, they were at New Year's Eve parties. We pulled them out of there. And the next day, you had the lead battalion on the ground in the Middle East. Within 3 days, you had the whole brigade on the ground. That force projection is extraordinary, and which is why we still maintain the focus on tactical readiness, but on the strategic aspect, what we're going to talk about a lot this year are the choices we've made with emergency deployment readiness exercises, our defender exercises in Europe and Southeast Asia. So we put about $300 million in to increase the EDRI program. So we can have about another 6 to 8 EDRIs a year where we can get battalion and brigade size elements, cold start, send them anywhere in the world so we can have that dynamic force projection and work with our allies and partners worldwide. Their Defender Series exercise. This is similar to kind of the Reforger thing we did in the 80s. We would take a CONUS-based division, send them over to Europe, and we're going to alternate Europe, Asia for the foreseeable future. And what you'll see there is they kind of rehearse the O plans by bringing them forward, offloading capability in shipyards, getting them on hets, moving them through the cities, and getting to their position. But we're having a fanatical focus with the clock. Get them on the ships, get them out of the yard, get them into position. We're doing remarkably well with the heavy formations. But we got to keep getting better so that those repetitions are exercising muscles that we haven't been using because we've been in the sustained combat operations for the last 19 years in the Middle East. So strategic readiness will be of particular emphasis this year, but on the tactical side, doing very well. Maxed out CTC rotations, units are still performing very well. When you have over half of those brigades ready to go at any given time, it's truly a testament to the uniform leadership in the Army. It's really remarkable. General Murray was here this morning. I think he talked a little bit about modernization. This was something we had to address. When you look at the national defense strategy of the country, we've got to continue to maintain technological margin to beat best of breed in all weapon systems, to beat anybody on earth. Our weapon systems are old. When you're on the Mike and Victor model of a weapon system, you can't engineer another ounce out of these capabilities. which is why a couple of years ago we made the determination, 6 investment portfolios, 31 signature systems. But when over half your balance sheet is fixed on people and operations and maintenance, about north of 60%, you're fixed. So you had to go inside the research, development, acquisition accounts and say, we got to make hard choices, which is where you've heard of this legendary night court. The Army staff filled with middle-aged people have a sense of humor, right? So the 4 people at the end of the table calling the shots. We made very hard choices and started the divestiture, because every investment program has divestiture, of divesting legacy systems. Now we're into essentially year 2.5 because we primed the pump in the fall of 17 on the S&T accounts by moving about 80% of the funding against those 6 portfolios. And we're in the second major night court effort now. We're restructuring the procurement accounts, refining the S&T side, where you have, by the middle of this fit-up, we're going to be over half of our procurement accounts towards new capability. Major, dramatic transformation over the course of the last 2.5 years. And now prototypes and demonstrators are flying, they're exploding, you can smell them, you can see them, they're putting hours against them. We're mitigating our risk for the development of these new weapon systems. Because we've had challenges in the past, there's no doubt. So how do we reduce the risk? Because of the AFC establishment, the warfighters have a seat at the table. We've brought requirements, community, and acquisition closer together. That's clarity and speed of decision making. And it's yielding results. What's going to be a challenge for us is in 22, 23, when they start to mature and we have to make choices in this milestone process, do you start buying LRIP tranches? Because there's a bow wave of capability coupled with growing the force. Because we're 1-to-1 bog dwell time worldwide, we have to keep growing. We're breaking our people. But that presents a challenge for us. If we don't get 3 to 5% real growth in the out years, there's a collision course. Do you keep growing the force? Do you start bringing in all these capabilities? The choices that will have to be made if we can't increase the top line in 22 and 23. So will that mean we have to flatten end strength? Do we tier the weapon systems that we bring into the formations? These are choices we're talking about, we're looking at, and we're going to be prepared to make. But the point of emphasis we look at is we need new capabilities. So can we reduce demand worldwide? That's why you hear about Secretary Esper's combatant commander reviews. And really that's, are we meeting national objectives worldwide? Are we being efficient with every soldier, sailor, airman, and marine that we send forward? Can the allies do better? Can we increase their capabilities and do more of a burden? And that's everything from investing as well as putting more boots forward for the form of deterrence. So which is why our third priority, reform, is so important. Reform is an attitude. It's like getting up and working out and eating right. It's hard because it's addressing every penny that you have on the balance sheet. Our Commander's Accountability and Execution Reform Program, General Tom Horlander, he's doing a remarkable job. 4 years ago, we had $4 billion in de-obligations. So $4 billion in your balance sheet that went back to the U.S. Treasury that we didn't get to spend. It's like a Greek tragedy. Especially when you're up there crawling across broken glass to get a budget across, and you're giving money back to the Treasury. And you realize it's right under your nose. So every other week, we run these reviews, and you got 50 people up on the VTC, and you're going through every penny. They've reduced the obligations by over 80%. That's money back in our pocket that we can invest in a training plan, buying parts, doing great things. So he's done an incredible job, but he's not done yet. That's reform. Night court. Having the courage to sit there and say, what is the priority within the Army? Making a decision and killing something, and then having the courage to go across the river and look a congressman or senator in the face and say, we don't need it anymore. But here's the opportunity for your manufacturer that's going to be presented going forward. It is a painful endeavor, trust me, but you got to do it. Because like I said before, we have $178 billion. But you got 191,000 people worldwide. You got to modernize the weapon systems. You got to build new houses, hurricanes, coronavirus. We're everywhere. So every dollar we have is like ammunition. You're loading in the magazine, you're focused. And we got to hit targets. A lot of challenges in front of us, but it's an extraordinary group of people that I get to serve with every day. It's a remarkable experience. Our soldiers are incredibly resilient. When you look at 19 years of sustained combat operations, 1-to-1 bog dwell time, and they just look for the opportunity to keep going. We're doing the best we can with the cards we've been dealt, and we think we're doing okay. When you're 24% of the budget in the Department of Defense and you get that kind of return on investment, that's a pretty good deal. So with that, I'd be happy to take some of your questions.
Sir, I'm coming.
Get moving, McAleese. Let's go, man. I got to get back to work.
I thought your speech would go longer, sir.
I'm trying to accommodate your guests here, Jim.
Sorry.
Yeah.
One way to decrease demand is to drive proactive influence. One way to decrease demand is to drive proactive influence operations against our adversaries, to get them to change. What do you see in terms of the Army's approach with DIME and whole of government to do that?
So you want to be more specific?
Well, so with Russia and China in particular, they also have Achilles heels that involve cognitive versus kinetic heels. And so
Information operations.
information operations, but more encompassing than that. And so there's ways with DIME, whole of government, to drive them to react to us, therefore decreasing demand. Where do you see the Army going with that?
So first, from information operations, it's really remarkable. I say this all the time, that Putin plays his hand extremely well, considering how weak it is. And it's really largely the information space of where he plays in. We're looking very hard at our information operations and basically the organizational construct of our Army cyber, and how do we address that to have more aggressive approach with information operations. If you were to go to Afghanistan today versus 10 years ago, this is a place in particular, the organization NSOC Alpha is playing, where we have information operations where we're tied into the social media space. So the Taliban will run an op and say something, something happened in a village, and this was the ANSF made this. We can respond in less than 30 minutes, put leaders on the ground, get on social media, and react, because it's the impressions that are made upon people. The Russians do this in Ukraine. They do it in Eastern Europe all the time to scare and confuse people and basically hurt the brand of the United States. We're doing this very well in Afghanistan, which is markedly different than where you were 10 years ago. Because if you can't show the ANSF has the ability to provide services, rule of law, defend the people, at least you know what you're getting with the Taliban. You get something. Most of the challenges they face in Afghanistan are dispute resolution, which is why we tried to create this rule of law field force about 10 years ago, and it didn't work out because they were killing us in the information space. They own the mosque. But now we're beating them on social media, and there's tremendous difference from that standpoint. Now it's how we scale that. We've learned a lot from that, and we're looking at how we can do that in the Army cyber organization. With respect to whole of government, I think you're seeing some of that now. Secretary Pompeo was just in Africa, and he's putting foreign aid in certain areas on the continent where we're lining up very nicely with the State Department. This is also a place, if you look at East Asia, the president's efforts with economics. He is doing a tremendous job of showing how economics is a national security issue and driving the trade talks with China. And you see the Department of Defense's posture. China is the strategic pacing threat. All of our investments for modernization, our Defender exercises, as well as our Pacific Pathways, we've increased the duration of deployments in Southeast Asia, our touch points. I mean, we put boots on the ground in Palau for the first time in 37 years. So increasing those touch points in East Asia, coupled with the economic moves that the president's making, that's how we're coming together from an intergovernmental standpoint. So doing it on multiple continents, and it's yielding great benefits.
Sir, Jerry Hendricks over here.
Where are you?
The other side. During last week's Sea Power, or the hearings with the Navy leadership, one of the congressmen made the mention that given that the Navy and the Air Force are recapitalizing the nuclear triad and great burden on that the Army with Military Sea Lift Command as being the primary customer should pay for that. Did you have any immediate thoughts on the idea of the Army recapitalizing Military Sea Lift Command?
I don't know him, sir. He's from a different conference, sir.
So, I mean, if we were to do that, then they would need to pay for missile defense, logistics, medical care. Those are just off the top of my head. So, I mean, we could go that route, and it would be, I mean, it'd be a very difficult challenge for them. I mean, if you look at the things that we do for the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marine Corps, we absorb billions of dollars of bills to support their operations. So, I mean, it's a core skill of driving a boat. So we prefer the Navy to do that.
Hello, sir. Over here.
Hi,
Yeah.
Doug Brooks, International Stability Operations Association. We've heard a lot today about the refocus on great power competition, but the reality is the Army is always going to be involved in counterinsurgency and state building, really. What is being done to sort of maintain that expertise for the future?
We over the last 3 years, we've created 5 security force assistance brigades. This is specific to advise and assist skill sets. There's 2 of them that have deployed to the Middle East. We just announced recently to send that brigade to Africa. So this is to institutionalize that behavior and skill set for advise and assist with partners. Huge investment. These are second command opportunities, for NCOs and officers, so they're tremendously talented people, and the force structure associated with that. So this is our way for institutionalizing something we didn't do post-Vietnam era. We have 5. We're going to have 5 in the active and 1 in the Guard. Yes, sir.
Hello, sir. I'm Jimmy Jenkins and from Huntsville, Alabama, a small company called Dynetics, and served a lot of time with the Space and Missile Defense Command. Could you give us your perspective on how the Army is going to contribute to the Space Force and what your perspectives are, pro and con, along those lines, sir?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Massive merger underway, if you will. We're going to, I mean, a lot of this will come down to how they're going to work through this in the tank, because it's a joint warfighting concept issue. And ultimately, where's the break point in responsibility in the fight? I mean, how can you break apart the division of labor? And that's really the work that's got to be done with the chairman and the chiefs. But we're the #1 consumer of space, and nobody needs it more than us. So we're clearly dialed in with this. We have some partnerships within the intelligence community, NRO and NGA in particular, where we're working with them on some low Earth orbit satellite capability. But the Space Force, we have a lot of people that do that today, and I presume many of them will go to the Space Force going forward. It's just a little early in the process to give a lot of specifics.
I feel like I'm throwing meat to a giant lion. What's the long-range hypersonic weapon really going to give you in Indo-PACOM fight that's going to scare the hell out of the Chinese?
It's game-changing. I think if you look at the speed and lethality and range of this weapon system, capability, it's extraordinary. The anti-access and area denial investments that the Chinese have made in particular gives tremendous standoff. By putting these capabilities forward, you're basically reversing that dynamic. Posturing, where you're going to posture the capabilities is particularly of interest too. We can do in some places with U.S. territories, but there are others that can you work out an arrangement with a partner? That would be a huge commitment by whoever that would be, because it sends such a tremendous signal. We'll see how that plays. But from a standpoint of the capability being developed, this is the Missile Defense Agency, Air Force, Navy, Army. We're in a joint interest. You emphasize the word interest, not joint program. But this is where we're working on the economies of scale for the buys. We are sharing all the test data. We're doing all the tests jointly. We've increased the test regime. There'll be multiple evolutions here over the next couple of years, in each of these years that are going forward. And the Army's going to have a capability fielded by first quarter 23. And we're excited about it. We think we'll probably be the first because of the the integration complexity is much less than that of the Navy, the Air Force, but we're going to need all of these capabilities in all those domains, and it will fundamentally alter our posture in the Pacific in particular. Yeah.
Hey, Secretary. Ingar Greb with 3M. Enjoyed having you by my tailgater at the Army-Navy game. Sorry about the outcome.
Ouch.
Sorry, not sorry. So those of us in this room who have been in the defense industry for a long time have experienced, in terms of driving innovation into the services, there is, I'd say sometimes a certain amount of reluctance that comes through risk aversion of program managers in terms of driving projects along timelines and so forth. Army Futures Command is a great example of how to try to overcome those kind of things. But I was just curious what your thoughts are about how sometimes that reluctance, by the way, makes a great deal of sense. Clearly, it makes a great deal of sense. But what are some of your thoughts about how we can drive, how this country can drive innovation into the services, into the Army, but allowing us to overcome some of those reluctances we have from program managers or from decision makers about, hey, you know, that's a little too risky. I got to figure out a way how to handle that, and that can cut into the timelines they have. Thanks.
Some of this is we've tried to drive this behavior top down in embracing the authorities that Congress gave us, other transaction authorities and others that to encourage some of these non-traditional companies that want the speed of business, really the speed of relevance in business, to get on contract and not have cash flow issues. We've done that in a handful of programs. We actually use more OTAs than any of the other services. We brought in some non-traditional players. They're developing our IVAS system. We're trying to encourage some others to go some of the major defense acquisition programs like OMFV or helicopters. A lot of it will be us providing the top cover to those PMs and PEOs so that they aren't going to feel like they're going to get burnt and be off the island alone. So General McConville and I are shoulder to shoulder on this, and Secretary Esper was probably the biggest proponent of this when he was the Sec Army, and now he's got the total hunting license. So we're trying to do that, but you got to get a win. And if we can pull one of these through the knothole in the next year, 18 months, that's when people are going to see, okay, I can do it too. So we're going to stay close with a handful of these programs and to show them it's okay, go for it. If you're going to make a mistake, do it, but adjust, just don't do it again. But it'll be incumbent upon those leaders of the services to stay with them and give them top cover. That's what they haven't had for a long time.
Mr. Secretary, Tom Spohr from the Heritage Foundation. General Murray this morning talked about the optionally manned fighting vehicle and how you were kind of recocking that program a little bit. I'm curious, there's been a lot of consolidation, especially in the tracked vehicle industry, and so I'm wondering if down the road, 18 months or wherever, if you only get one competitor in that program. I'm curious about your views on the importance of competition in a program like that. Thank you.
Sure. The OMFV was tough. That it has a painful recent past, and that's why we made the determination not to go forward, because of we knew we were going to end up expending a lot of money and not getting the outcome we wanted. So it took a lot of courage with Bruce Jetty and Mike Murray to come forward and say, this is where we're going to be at. We don't think we have to pull back from the table. And some of it, too, is just similar to the question I was just asked, is the approach, the acquisition strategy. You'll notice in this evolution, it's very similar like what we're doing with the IVAS program. We've got 5 OTAs that'll go out to companies. They'll come back with CAD drawings, then they'll refine those, then they're going to bend metal. And we'll give them a little more time. The previous strategy was short, it was very quick. So we'll allow a little more of this latitude for the manufacturers to try to unleash more of their engineering talents, ideas, to help us solve the outcome. And one of the things in particular, and this was General McConville, instead of being laser focused on requirement, tell them the characteristics that are important. Allow them to help us get the answer. Because otherwise you're just telling them, I want you to suck lemons and here's exactly how I want you to do it. They might have a better idea. And clearly we need to listen. We've had challenges. So With respect to whether or not there'll be competition downstream, there's winners and losers in everything. So if you can hang in there as long as you can and make them run hard to try to get their best engineers on it and try to bring the best capability forward, that's what we want. How long they'll hang in there is a business decision.
Mr. Secretary.
Where you at?
One of the things that both you and the chief have been working on, I know you've got a million things, but you've been looking at big data, moving to the cloud. You just sent out an exhort on that, on getting the Army moving in that direction. And the other one was on talent management. How are we going to do that? As many of the jobs that we have today will not be jobs that we have in the future. So I thought you might want to comment on those two
Sure.
things.
We have just over $800 million laid in across the FIDIP for the development of cloud architecture for the Army. We recognize that we've got to bring the synergy of all these weapon systems together in a combined arms formation. You hear about this effort that the Air Force introduced last October, JADC2. It's bringing any sensor, any shooter together. Sounds really good. It's really hard. You can't do it without the cloud architecture. You got people running around the Pentagon talking about AI all the time. Can't do AI without the cloud. So how you format and standardize the data so that it can be transferable across a common transport layer. It's the recognition of here's what a T-90 tank looks like at night during the day. How much of it do you need to look and then format the data, pump it into a system, write an algorithm. So if a satellite sees it, bad guy. Attack helicopter, cannon artillery. What is it that you want to kill it? It's reducing the span time from when you see it to putting it in front of somebody who can kill it. There'll always be a human in the loop, at least in America. I can't promise you what the other guys are going to do. But it's having that, reducing the span time of making a decision. So our cloud effort is entirely about weaponizing our platforms. That's the number one priority. We want to shut down data centers and save money and all stuff like that, but that's not going to kill the enemy. Our weapon systems will get integrated first. Our cloud effort is critically important to enabling our integrated battle command system. What we're going to really work hard on with the Air Force is making sure that it's complementary to the Air Force ABMS effort so that it can be integrated. So if an F-35 sees something, it can cue it down to an artillery piece. So we're going to, obviously, anytime we go anywhere, we fight together. But this is going to be really hard. And it has to start with a cloud architecture that we all can share the data seamlessly together. From a people standpoint, you can't do any of this stuff without really talented people, STEM talent in particular. So the General McConville he talks about people all the time because we're a people organization. We're the U.S. Army. And we need infantrymen, but we need data scientists. We need people that have unique STEM talent that can help us with the complexity of these new weapon systems and truly optimizing these capabilities. General Murray's looking at a variety of different things with Dr. Jetty about how do you create more software developers, more data scientists, because if you're going to bring the cloud to the Army, we're going to have a lot of outside talent that we're going to bring into the force that we don't have today. But the other pieces with what the chief's looking at is the battalion commander's assessment program. So think NFL Combine. We bring them down to Kentucky for 5 days, and we put them through a physical regimen. They sit in front of a board. They do psychological tests, because if you look at battalion commanders, that's why we started there first. They're the ones that are going to be the most influential on the younger people in the force, on the lieutenants, on those junior non-commissioned officers. We're going to do it with sergeant majors here in the very near future as well. But how important it is, because if you get that job wrong, you're not going to develop people properly. You're not going to retain people that you really want, who have a lot of options. So it's gone really well. The data shows that in many cases that we've gotten a lot of these things wrong. When you lined up somebody who looked really good on paper, they went to the combine and they blew it. And you see it a lot in the NFL, right? So it's putting the rigor behind these decisions for the future leaders in particular is really important, because you're making a huge investment in these men and women. So we recognize that you're finding a way to maximize the potential of your men and women is as much protecting them too. because we've got challenges in the force that continue to trend the wrong way. Sexual assault, suicide. There are a lot of challenges we have in the force, and every time you lose one of those, it hurts.
Thanks for
Where you at?
very encouraging
Sorry.
comments. Hypersonics, a lot of progress, game-changing capability. Curious how the Army and the other services are approaching defending against hypersonics.
So Missile Defense Agency is also a part of this process. Dr. Griffin is a big player in this effort, obviously. The satellite architecture is going to be critical. And while you hear a lot of people talk about low Earth orbit, because you need that wide aperture array so you can be able to find something quickly and to be able to cue it to a capability. So that's, there's as much how do you shoot it down, you're going to take it out, but it is finding the targets as well. So you hear a lot of effort on that here in the near term on the satellite architecture. And then from the missile defense side, a lot of opportunity there. I'm probably not the best to weigh in on that. It's largely an MDA-driven effort. All right, you got me jumping on red light here. They teach us in the airborne, don't go.
Yeah, over here. Right here. To your left.
Okay. Sir, Mike Mara, I was in INSCOM in the late 70s, early 80s, stationed in Europe as a linguist. My question is, when we did Reforger, the Soviets would end up doing friendship exercises, and we were able to look at what they were doing, they'd monitor what we were doing. And my question is, one, do the Russians still do those types of exercises? And two, with the shutting down of field stations around the world, do we still have the capability as well as the talent from DLI to actually perform the functions of INSCOM relative to the Russians today?
So the Russians have this thing called Zapad, and they run it roughly around the same time frame, and they try to line up and do their exercises as well. What's really unique about it now, we're much closer now on that 1,100-mile border, and it stretches them, and they yo-yo back and forth to try to match up against it, if you will, in their operations. So yes, they do. It's, you go to Europe in the next 60, 75 days, BBC will be covering it every night, and everybody will be breathing heavy about that, and they'll say, this is what the Russians are doing. But what's really unique about ours is we're going to have an airborne battalion, a brigade minus drop in Georgia. We're going to have CAV units doing live fires in Lithuania. So we're going to send a message here this spring. I'm heading there in about 10 or 12 days, and I'll be bouncing around to observe training and meet with partners. So it's been a remarkable effort for the last 5 years, this in particular, since they really launched this European Defense Initiative. The investments by the partners continue to grow. We met with the Estonians and the Latvians just within the last 24 hours. They're all making a lot of investments in infrastructure in particular. So it's very encouraging, and it's definitely strengthened the resolve of the NATO alliance. We are looking at the investments that we need and ranging with the ports between Gdansk and going all the way down into Italy, all the entry points that we would need to bring capability onto the continent. So General Gus Perna's team's done a tremendous job here. And if you look year over year in the performance, the span time keeps going down. From the moment they put them on the rails at Fort Bliss to when they were in position in places like Powitz, Poland, and other places. So it's been incredible to watch.
And the last question, sir, just the last 15, 20
Red light here, you're putting me in the trees, Jim. What are you doing, man?
Sir. I got to ask it, sir. Who's going to fight you in Congress this year?
Better turn those green.
It's
It's an election year, so it's tough. When you're divesting capabilities, it's tough. You got to be very clear about what you're trying to achieve. The Congress sees it for the second year. We terminated and truncated the buys of 186 systems in FY20. We did 80 this year. And when we did the office calls, General McConville and I testified in front of the HASC yesterday. When we did the office calls, they're kind of like, oh, that's it? So they're almost kind of conditioned now that we're going to keep going to reduce and cut. So I think we've been blessed, quite frankly, I think, Jim, of just the latitude that Congress has given us. They know we have to do this. They know we've been really ruthless in the prioritization. They're giving us, some leash to keep going. But I think if we don't perform, they're going to pull it back, and they have every right and concern to do that. So, but I mean, yesterday it wasn't particularly easy hearing, but it was a good discussion, and you could see they want to help us.
Well spoken, sir.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
We'll take a 10-minute break. We'll be back in our seats, if it's okay, by 9:40 sharp for Congressman Whitman.